Lately, we've been talking about a lot of difficult topics, politics and books, and red flags and books. Today, we're going to talk about something positive. Our green flags, the things we look for, or the things that when we see them, we think, yeah, we're going to read that book. Welcome back to the Life on Books podcast. My name is Tony. With me, as always, is Andy, a.k.a. Metafictional Meathead.
Morning, Tony.
What up?
Oh, you know.
So, great weekend of watching old men get beat up.
Yep.
Shout out to any of our MMA fans out there. But let's just get right into it. We're going to stick with our traditional format of the reading update. What have you been reading lately, Andy?
I've been reading lots of things. So I started reading The Invented Part by Rodrigo Fresan. I'm about 100 pages in. I love it. It's it kind of has that like pyrotechnic feel to it that I'm always talking about.
Yeah.
Just great writing and style. It's a lot of fun.
Cool.
I have been reading The Tunnel by William Gass. I'm woefully behind on our loose plans for it. But same thing. It's great.
Yeah.
Gass's writing is incredible.
Yep.
I am feeling, this is a reread for me. I am feeling a little bit more, I guess, confident, for lack of a better word. You know, I'm a little bit more aware of what's going on.
Sure.
Kind of, at the very least, I have an idea of what I'm getting into.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems a little bit less daunting. I have started Song of Solomon for the book club.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also woefully behind on that.
Yep. For the record, that was Andy's choice for the book club.
Yeah.
He was the one that added that to the list to be voted on.
Well, you know, just had so much other stuff going on. Like I was, I don't think I talked about it last week because we didn't do a recap. I finished Against the Day.
Yep.
So that took up a lot of my time. Like I think I had talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like I really just want to like finish it.
Yeah.
Again, I've said this before for like other books. I was enjoying it a lot. It was a great book, but I was just like, I want to put this to bed so I can move on to other things.
Yeah.
So, over the last, not this past week, but the week before, like when we're supposed to be starting Song of Solomon, like a lot of my reading time went into Against the Day. And I messaged you this last night. I had been intending to get caught up on The Tunnel and Song of Solomon yesterday, but I ended up binging pretty much all of every arc bends its Radian, the new novel from Sergio de la Pava.
Yep.
Which was okay. It was good. It was a good book. I kind of jokingly had said this to you. All it really made me want to do was reread A Naked Singularity.
Yeah.
Because that is just one of the. I've been talking about this with Kevin, the HV book nerd, because he just reread it. Like it's just thinking about it. It's like one of the best. It's thoughtful. It's funny. It's so fucking funny.
Yeah.
And the thing with every arc for me was it felt too short to me. Like, you know, it was kind of this almost like existential detective novel, and it kind of started out like leaning heavy on the detective side of that, and then very abruptly flipped to being more existential.
Yeah.
And not that either of those parts were bad, but it was just such like an abrupt change, and it felt like I guess it could have been like fleshed out a little bit more, a little bit maybe, like I said, longer or more developed. You know, it didn't feel very cohesive.
Yeah.
The way it like, excuse me, just abruptly switched gears, and the style kind of changed.
Yeah.
So
Anything else?
I have been reading more of the Lispector biography, but Why This World, but I don't have much to say about that. So
Cool. I too am reading probably too many books at the moment. So I'm currently reading Song of Solomon and The Tunnel, as you mentioned, for the book club and the unofficial group read on The Tunnel. Enjoying both of them. Not finding The Tunnel as challenging as I thought it would be. I'm maybe 80-ish pages in at this point.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, like I understand why people would read this and think, I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's stylistically very similar to Omensetter's Luck, even though the themes and the setting is very different.
Right.
But like the writing, I guess Gas's writing is very prominently, this is Gas.
Yeah.
And so that's really helping.
I think if you went in reading The Tunnel as your first Gas, it would be like...
It would be tough,
It'd be so tough.
Yeah.
But having a little bit under his belt,
Yeah.
I think... I know before I read that, I had read Omensetter's Luck, and I think I also read In the Heart of the Country.
Yeah.
So I had a couple Gas works under my belt before I started it.
There's so many references. I think if I really wanted to stop and take the time to investigate every reference, I would probably be getting more out of it, but it would just take me much longer.
Yeah.
So some of it I am like, I'm curious about this one, let me look it up. Others I'm just like, okay, that reference is going to go over my head, and it is what it is.
I think, it's one of those books that you have to read more than once.
Probably,
Because, like, you do kind of just... Your initial read, it's similar to what I've said about Gravity's Rainbow in the past. Like, if you try to go in, like, I'm gonna look everything up, I'm gonna understand everything, I'm gonna just squeeze all the juice out of this on my first read, you're going to be so overwhelmed.
Yeah.
You're gonna miss the, I guess, fun parts. Like, you're gonna miss out on just like the quality of the writing. Like, you just have to at certain points just kind of tune out all the illusions, or I shouldn't say tune out, but not worry about all the illusions.
Yeah.
And just like let the musicality of the writing just take you over.
Yeah, you definitely get more out of it from a experience standpoint to just read it and let it be what it is and just let it kind of flow. I will say it's interesting. I've talked about how my ADHD is usually very triggered by really long blocks of text with no page breaks or paragraph breaks or anything like that. Because the typesetting in The Tunnel is so experimental. Jesus Christ, I can't talk today. It's very unique.
A long hour, folks.
Yeah, it's very unique. There's big fonts. There's clusters of text that are put into shapes.
Yeah.
That's actually like
There's
helping.
limericks thrown in.
Right. That's
Yeah.
actually helping me because it's like so engaging on the page of how it looks.
Yeah. Even in like long blocks where it's like, because we were talking about this a little bit in the group chat, like even where it's just like a long block of text and there's not really any of those like interjections of, like I said, like a limerick or, playfulness. There are moments where like within this paragraph, like the narrator's tone and what he's talking about will just abruptly flip.
Yeah.
And you get the same kind of thing. Like, it's engaging because he went from this like coherent thing about his childhood or his coworkers to just like kind of a mad ranting and raving.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm really enjoying that. Last week, like you mentioned, we didn't do the reading recap. So I did read the Tartar Steppe by Dino Buzzati. I freaking loved it. That book is really good. Was not at all what I expected. I'm not really sure what I expected to be. I mean, it's considered like kind of higher literature. It's a translated work from Italian. And so I was expecting a very like dense and complicated read, but it's not. The language is pretty straightforward. But the author's ability to make you feel a sense of dread and anxiety is like unbelievable.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And the writing is really good. Like really, he does this interesting thing where there's a lot of exposition. There's not a ton of dialogue. And he's kind of putting you in the mindset of the protagonist, Giovanni Drogo, and really working through the psychology that he's dealing with. And then like there'll be these interjections of these really beautiful descriptions of the landscape and the environment. So that's cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to read that. I just picked up my copy for anyone that's listening and is curious about it. NYRB also published it. They published it under the title The Stronghold.
And it's a different translation as well.
Is it?
Yeah. So I'm curious. I'd be curious to read The Stronghold.
I meant to ask. I wanted to ask you that before I bought it, but
yeah, I don't think it'll. I mean, I said this in a review that I haven't uploaded yet, but you know, I minored in Italian in college. I can't really speak a lick of it now, but I always thought that like Italian translated fairly well to English. So I don't know if there's like a ton of need for like really heavy reworkings of phrases, turns of phrases and things like that. But
Gotcha.
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'd love to just like maybe grab your copy and just read a chapter or two out of it just to see. But I also love the cover of the edition that I have. It's pretty sick.
It is pretty cool. I mean, the cover for the NYRB one is nice too.
Yeah. I mean, they print a good book. So
yeah.
And then yesterday I also started Fulgentius by Cesar Aira.
Oh yeah, I gave you that, right?
You did, yeah. Maybe like 50 pages into that. It's cool.
I believe it's actually Fulgentius
Is that how you say it?
in Latin. Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
I took a lot of Latin, so
Well, it's funny. I looked it up because I wanted to know, and it was referencing a different person by that name, and that's how the speaker pronounced it.
Oh.
So maybe it's...
I could be wrong if I am remembering my years of Latin correctly. I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a hard G.
Gotcha. I'll have to double check, but I really didn't know what it was about or anything about it other than you said it was good and you liked it. And NYRB is actually currently having up to 40% off sale, which by the time this episode's up probably will be over. But both you and I are abstaining. I've accumulated way too many books this year, both buying and giving to me and everything.
It's insane.
Yeah. So I was like, I would really love to make a little bit bigger of a dent in my personal collection of books that I own but haven't read. And so what I decided to do is basically during the week, I'm going to be reading some of these books that we're doing for like the book club or like our longer reads.
Yep.
And then I'm going to dedicate the weekends to going shelf by shelf and just picking the shortest book off of each shelf. So I started with the A's, and that was the shortest one. And next weekend I'll go to the B shelf. You know what I mean? So I'll just go through. And that, you know, because those are books that you can read in a day or two.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you brought that up because I have the same thought. Like recently, I have acquired way too many books.
Yeah.
My library is overflowing.
Yeah.
And I recently picked up a few more this week when I went to pick up my copy of the new De La Pava. Grabbed a couple books while I was there. Ordered a couple from the bookstore, and I was just like, you know, I kind of had planned to do it, like to pick up a few, and then it just kind of like I need to stop for a while, and like I don't have a set date or like number of books I want to read or anything like that. But like I really want to start putting a dent in my actual personal library. So
yeah.
Gonna do my best to abstain from book buying.
It's gonna be tough. It's gonna be tough.
We'll hold each other accountable. The listeners will hold us accountable.
Yeah. So let's get into today's main discussion, which is our green flags in books. But before we do that, just a reminder that you can support the podcast by joining our Patreon community, the book club, and some additional stuff is on there. And we post up to 2 additional podcast episodes per month. So if you really enjoy these discussions, you can get even more of them over on Patreon, plus a bunch of other stuff going on. The link is in the description. And what's your first green flag, Andy? What do you see on a book that you go, oh yeah, now I want to read this?
So we had kind of joked about this when you were telling me. I think it was when you were telling me about the Tartar Steppe.
Yeah.
And you were like, I don't know how to describe this.
Yeah.
Like, it's not something, you know. I don't know if you'd get that sensation from like picking up the book and like reading the synopsis or something like that. But like if I'm having a conversation with someone and they're just like, I don't know how to like succinctly describe this. Like, have you finished Infinite Jest yet?
No, I actually have about I have about 200 pages left of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Describe Infinite Jest to me.
Encyclopedic, it's about some tennis players and some drug addicts. I mean, I don't know.
I'm in.
Yeah.
Like, obviously you kind of have to like kind of figure out who you're talking to.
Right.
Like if someone's just, I don't want to like diminish anyone, but if it's an intelligence thing and they're not like really having a hard time describing, then maybe it's one thing. But if they're just like, yeah, there's this, there's that, it's got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of, and like there's just so much. It is so encyclopedic and sprawling. The scope is so vast.
Yeah.
It's so, everything about it is so imaginative.
Right.
There was some scenes you had messaged me about Infinite Jest that you really loved, and you kind of, I remember when I was reading it, like I read that the passage you were talking about and the other ones, I was just like, how did this guy come up with this?
I know, yeah.
Like if there's stuff like that, like that just intrigues me so much.
Yeah, it's funny when I was kind of making my list of green flags, I was like, basically all of these are just like antitheses of the red flags, but I think kind of what you're saying is, and I feel the same way, is that if a book is, it's an enemies to lovers, if it's hero's journey, if you can like just slap a label on it like that, that's like, no, I don't like that.
Right.
So it's the opposite of whatever that
if you can describe the plot in like just not necessarily the specifics, but the general gist of how the story is set up and what takes place in 2 sentences or less.
Right.
Then I'm kind of just like, if you can, like you were saying, just kind of slap a generic label on it, then it kind of pulls me away. But if it's like this sprawling mess that's not easily defined, I'm just pulling on my list. Then I'm just like, I'm so in. I'm so interested in what this is about. Like it's funny, people ask me like what kind of books I like to read, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know how to describe.
Yeah.
I try to just be like, like weird and obscure fiction. Like that's kind of the best I've come up with lately. But like, I don't know how to describe what I like to read. And like
literature is not a genre.
Right.
It's a category.
Right.
Like dystopian sci-fi, that's a genre.
Right.
Romantasy, that's a genre.
I also feel so pretentious if someone's like, oh, what genres do you like to read? Literature.
Right.
They just sound like an asshole.
Yeah. I mean, we are, but
yeah. I am, but I like to. I am, but I try to be a little bit more specific and
maintain some decorum here.
Yeah,
that's a good one. I feel the same. So my first green flag is books that are about either really big historical events or kind of they're books about concepts rather than people. I just find that I gravitate towards stuff that is more conceptual rather than the story of a person. So if I'm reading the synopsis of a book, actually there's a great example on my shelf. I want to say it's called The End of August by Yu Miri. Mm-hmm. And it's about this Olympian from Korea and their kind of moral conundrum of competing in the Olympics because they have to compete for Japan because it's during the Japanese occupation. So that's probably like something like that's probably as close as I'm going to get to like a story about like a person, but it's still appealing to me because it's like this broader concept of this moral choice due to this like world event of the Olympics and of the Japanese occupation of Korea. So things like that I'm really drawn to those. Or I think like Infinite Jest is a good example where that book is not necessarily about like the characters. Like it is like each character has a storyline and arc in Infinite Jest, but it's really not about them. You could take out Gately you could take out Steeply, and you could even take out like Hal to some degree, and like you would still have like infinite Jest.
I disagree with that.
But like, I mean, it wouldn't be as good.
Yeah.
But all of those characters are just playing pieces to a much bigger concept.
Yeah.
So like, if you took any one of them out by themselves, you wouldn't be like, well, this book's about nothing now. Like the overarching theme is still there.
Yeah.
Even though they do play integral roles in the general story of Infinite Jest. So for me, it's like, I would just say books about either really prominent, impactful events or broader concepts.
Yeah. I like when there's like, I talked about this a little bit a while back when we had Ed Park on, and we were talking about same bed, different dreams. You know, the difference between historical fiction and fiction that uses history as a setting, you know, like that book was about the Korean War, or the Korean War played a pretty important role in that that novel, but it didn't really like take place during the Korean War. I mean, parts of it did, but it wasn't just a story about like some soldier, you know, fighting in the Korean War, kind of mixed up in the split between North and South and the historical context. And like, it kind of used that historical context to set up the rest of the novel.
Yeah.
You know, whereas I think like, you know, you can get just like kind of I don't say boring story, but like you have something that's set, you know, during the Revolutionary War. It's about a soldier in the Revolutionary Army, and he's this, that, and he's fighting for America, and it's just not as exciting to me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that doesn't mean I'd never read books like that. It's just not. It's not a green flag.
Right.
It's like when I see something that's not that, like it's more about like this bigger picture, that I'm like, ooh, yeah, I want to read this.
Yeah.
So, all right, what's your second green flag?
My next one, because when we did red flags, we talked a little bit about the online book community as well. So my next green flag is about the online book community. And I really like when I see, this kind of goes a few different ways, but I really like, I know someone is going to be an astute reader and probably a good follow if I see them posting a well-thought critique. Like, I know, I think I've talked about this before, but when Solenoid was first published, and I've read it recently. I thought it was a great book. It was very popular, at least in the groups of people I follow, and everyone was hyping it up and talking about how great it was. And then I saw this post of this person just kind of being like, that it wasn't for them. They did not enjoy it as much as it seemed like the community at large was. And their post, it wasn't just like, yeah, this book, I didn't like it, wasn't for me, I didn't think it was good. Or, you know, it was like well thought out, kind of gave, you know, astute reasons for why they didn't enjoy it, what they felt like were critiques of it, things like that. Another kind of green flag that ties into that is I saw a couple people that had read the book and really liked it and were really touting its prominence, acknowledging these critiques and being like, oh, you know what, I respect that this is why you feel this way. And I think that is another thing that can draw me to someone, you know, in the online book community, if I don't already like, you know, follow them or whatever, like being able to discuss differences in opinion without arguing about it. Like if you were like, just now you said something about Infinite Jest that I disagreed with, and you know how lame and not productive of a conversation would have been if I was just like, no, Tony, that was stupid.
Right.
I don't agree with you. I'm not gonna. No, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't lead to anything productive for us. Doesn't lead to anything productive for anybody that's listening. And you know, obviously we're not talking about that book today, so we don't really have the time to get into it, but like we could have a legitimate conversation about that difference in opinion.
Right.
and it would probably lead to further understanding for both of us and anybody listening.
Yeah.
So anytime I see like an actual conversation, a well thought out discussion about difference in opinion, like that, I like to see. That kind of lets me know that the people having that discussion are probably going to be worth following. So
yeah, cool. All right, my second green flag is translated works.
nice.
And this is probably in your list.
Yeah.
So we'll combine them. But I think I never really was like super aware of this or really thinking about if a work is translated or not previously, despite having read translated works in the past. Like Count of Monte Cristo and just really some more famous works like some Dostoevsky stuff. And like, it's translated, right? Like, Dumas was French and whatever,
right.
But they're so popular, like you almost don't even think of them as translated works in a way. At least I didn't, because I was more just reading them on
I was the same way.
Yeah. And then just, through doing the podcast and some influence from you and some other people, just getting more into translated works. And what I've found that I really enjoy about them is, number one, I think it says a lot about a work if people think it should be translated into another language, particularly into English for the U.S. market, because the U.S. market, like many industries, is like kind of the place to it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the world, for better or for worse. And there's plenty of hot selling books in the United States that are written in English. There's plenty of good books that are written in English in the United States. So I think for a publishing company, even if it's a small one, to say, no, we think this work, should be entered into this market, I think it says a lot about it. Like it's a kind of a big, feather in the cap of like, this is good enough that more than the people outside the community it came from need to read it. And then also, this is something we talked about with Chad Post from Open Letter when he was on the podcast, is that people are just doing different things. They're trying different things in these different countries and in different languages. And so there's a lot more to choose from, a lot more variety of styles and themes and just general approaches to writing. So I think that's what really attracts me to translated works.
Yeah, you said pretty much everything I would have said about it. I think there's just, you get exposed to so many new ideas, new styles, so much uniqueness in translated work. I think, if you looked at a lot of the books that are like really popular and mainstream, being written and published in English, I don't want to say they're all the same, but there's probably a lot of like similarities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just cool to be able to be exposed to what might be, coming out of what's coming out of a different country, what's profound and popular and well received in another language. The authors probably have a different perspective on life than an American author.
Right.
You just get such an exposure to different themes and ideas, and the writing's usually, has unique flair to it as well. So
yeah. And then of course I think there's something to be said too about the translator's influence on the text, and I've certainly gained a better appreciation of that after talking with Chad. I think that it's kind of a cool like collaborative project, and just adds something unique to the overall reading experience as well. So,
yeah.
All right. What's your third green flag?
My next one is length. And it kind of goes both ways, because we talked about this, or I talked about this a while back when we did our like favorite medium length books.
Yeah.
And I sort of struggled putting that list together, because I think we did like 300 to 500 pages for that.
Yeah, something like that.
And most of my like favorite books or books that seem to have the greatest impact on me are like on either end of that spectrum. You know, there are a couple within that 300 to 500 range that have really just like floored me and I love, but like there's mostly closer to the like, I guess 300 now that I'm thinking about it. But like most of my books that have been the most profound reading experience have been on either side of that. Either really long, like 700 plus pages, or like 200 and less, maybe even 150 and less.
Yeah.
Because they just have, they seem to have the kind of like themes and ideas that I like, or characteristics, I should say, that I like, where it's this kind of sprawling, encyclopedic, very large scope, very imaginative. There's lots to it. Or, you know, you get all of the themes and ideas and everything that a novel could theoretically have, just like punching you right in the face, like right out of the gate. Like this is gonna be it.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I would,
like if I'm like walking through a bookstore and not really looking for anything in particular, like even if I don't end up liking it, like if I see a big book on the shelf, I'm like, I gotta touch this. I gotta see what this is.
Yeah.
This is about, what the deal is. And sometimes I read it, I'm like, you know, I don't think this story, this narrative will be for me.
Yeah.
And I put it back. But like other times I'm like, yep, this is it.
I didn't have big books on my list of green flags, but I definitely agree with you. And this is very similar to what we just talked about with the translation, where if a book is very long, there's a real tangible printing cost that comes with a big book.
Yes.
And so publishers need to believe that it's going to be worth it to publish it. And I'm sure there's a lot of economics in that as far as it's worth it financially. Like people are going to buy it. But I also think that like that has to go through that vetting process of this is a good enough book that people need to read it.
Right.
And the tricky thing is, yeah, bigger books are a little bit more expensive, but there is no direct correlation between page length and cost, right? Like, so sometimes there's a short book that's still $20 or whatever, and a really long book might be 25. So it's not like these publishers can, it's a 1,000-page book, we're going to charge $50 for it. Like it's just not practical. So they do have to really believe that the writing is good enough that it's worth publishing. So I think right off the bat, that's kind of like this hidden proof of concept of how good the book is due to its length. The other thing that for me that attracts me to a big book is just like having an appreciation for how hard it is to write, and just knowing that that's crazy. That you wrote a 1,000-page book. So I'll let a little cat out of the bag here. I actually just finished the first draft on a book.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So this is kind of a weird story. I tried to write a book many years ago. I had this great idea for a story that was extremely loosely based on something that happened to me. And then I just like thought like it was kind of like when Edgar David Johnson told us about how he came up with the concept for a pay-as-you-go, which was that guy had like gone swimming, like skinny dipping, and then someone had stolen all of his clothes and his wallet and his passport. And that was kind of like the thing that like launched it. It's a very similar situation for me. Like I went through this thing and then I was like, oh, that would make like a good kind of like premise for a story. And so I had maybe 60 or 70 typed pages. And this was many years ago before like cloud storage was a thing. And I had no backup and my hard drive crashed and I lost the whole thing. And so I tried to rewrite it probably half a dozen times just in various points over the years and could never get like more than like 5 or 10 pages in, and just was like, it's just never going to happen. And then a question you and I get fairly frequently is like, would you guys ever write a book? And I kind of don't really think of myself as a writer. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, nah, I'm just more of a reader at this point. Like I liked to write when I was in high school and stuff, but it was like probably just like poetry or whatever.
Yeah.
And I have a bajillion hard drives because of the work I do with video production. And so I have like my client work, I have all the stuff with social media, and a really good practice when you're a professional is redundancy. Lesson learned many years ago from losing this hard drive. So I back up everything, so I have duplicates. And so every once in a while, things are just starting to get a little cluttered, and I'll go through and delete stuff. And I was doing that 2 weeks ago, and I stumbled upon my most recent attempt of rewriting this book, which was probably 3 or 4 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
And I read what I had written, and I was like, hey, this is actually not bad. So my ADHD kicked in, and I just ignored everything I was doing, organizing my hard drives, and I sat down and started typing, and a few hours later, I was at like 18,000 words. And so I think like the average novel is like 60 to 70,000 ish, and that's probably like near 300 pages. And I was like, wow, that was like not that hard. And I felt like in a good rhythm. And so every night the past 2 weeks ish, maybe 10 days, I've just sat down and written for at least an hour. And I literally just got to the end of like the first draft last night. It was at 34,000 words. And I felt when I was going through it, there was a lot missing, but I just had such a clear vision for like where I wanted like the arc to go and the story to go.
Yeah.
So like, let me just get like the framework down, and then I can go back through and like add and just, color in, fill in the lines a little bit. So I actually was like, I'll start that next week, and I couldn't wait. So I started yesterday, and I'm already like up to like 38,000 words. So I'm shooting for like 50 to 60,000. It'll probably be pretty short. It probably sucks. You know what I mean? But it's like,
it maybe, but it's also probably been a worthwhile endeavor.
I'm having fun doing it. I always had like a little bit of a bucket list that was like record and release a full length album.
Yeah.
Write one book. You know what I mean? Like, just these artistic endeavors because I enjoy them. Maybe it doesn't suck. Maybe it sucks. I don't really care. I'm going to have a couple people read it just to tell me if they think it's total trash or not.
Yeah.
And if I get decent feedback from fairly neutral parties, then I'll maybe pursue it seeing the light of day. But if everyone's like, dude, this is just unreadable, like drivel, I'd be like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. I got to do that. I have kind of in the same boat. Like, it just seems like to me, it'd be this thing that at least has the potential to be fun and enjoyable. But like, I've had this idea for a couple 2-3 years now. That's just been like gnawing at me.
Got to do it.
Like, I got to do this. I have to like sit down and at least give it a shot. And I just haven't made time, and I need to. Yeah.
There's definitely some imposter syndrome going on with me where like through the whole thing, I was having fun doing it, but I'm just like, I'm not a writer. Like I'm not an Ed Park or, you know what I mean? Like you talk to these people and they're so smart, and I'm just like, I'm an idiot, you know? But then you look at somebody like Colleen Hoover, no offense to Colleen Hoover or her fans, but she basically said, oh, I want to write a book just for funsies, and I'm going to share it with my mom because she'll think it's cool. And she like self-published on Kindle, and her mom read it, and then some book blogger read it, was like, this is actually great, and then now she's like the best-selling author in the world right now. So, I mean, I have no illusions. I'm not under no illusions that that's going to happen. But one of the other kind of, I think the timing of me coming across that incomplete draft was I had just read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, which is all about writing in the publishing industry. And it's just kind of like, I don't know, it just seemed like a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But going back to how that pertains to long books, I mean, I already had an appreciation for how challenging writing is, but now having done this, I'm just like, man, I felt like I was typing forever. And I'm like, this is a novella length as it stands. So, okay. So my next green flag, excuse me. We did red flags about a month ago now, if you want to go listen to those. Hidden gems / unpopular books. So if a book kind of doesn't have any red flags to it, and I can't find like too many reviews. That's usually something that's kind of appealing to me. Like A Hard Rain Falling by Don Carpenter definitely checks that box. Obviously, he was a pretty well-respected writer back in the 60s and 70s, but never really saw like huge fame. But then you read that book and it's just like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
The 40 Days of Musa Dog by Franz Werfel. That's another example. That's a book that I did. That checked a lot of boxes for me. Like you had mentioned, saw it on the shelf at the bookstore. It's a big book. It's 800 pages or more. And then, what is this about? Oh, it's about the Armenian genocide. So it's about this like big event.
Yep.
And then I like look it up on Goodreads and it's been rated like 400 times. And I'm like, yeah, I'm buying this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was great. Incredible book. So, that one's a little more ambiguous, hidden gem. Like, how do you know it's a gem until you read it? But there's some signs, so I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I would totally agree with that. And I think it kind of ties into what my next green flag, which is small and independent publishers.
Yes.
Because they tend to publish a lot of things like that obviously they want to make money on the publication, but this like sweeping success and profit is not their main goal.
Yeah.
If you look at something like a Penguin Random House or like Harper or whoever publishes Colleen Hoover and Sarah J. Maas and all that, like,
who does publish Colleen Hoover? Let's look at that.
They're concerned with publishing something that a lot of people are going to buy.
Yeah.
And I think they probably have the Planet Fitness model where they want people to buy the book. They don't really care if people read it. If it succeeds, I don't say if it succeeds, but if it's like well received in terms of quality. But I think if you find like some independent publishers that you like, especially if they're doing works in translation, maybe not exclusively like something like Open Letter or Charco Press or something like that, where they're only doing works in translation, but where they're kind of doing it for the love of the game and really trying to get out like unique and experimental and exciting literature.
Yeah.
That's something I always look for.
Yeah.
I've talked about it before, like, because people have asked us, like, what do you look for when you go to the bookstore? Like, I have, a small handful of publishers that I really like that, I've seen books of theirs like at like a Gibson's or a Barnes and Noble, but not a ton.
Yeah.
And, it's like, okay, I'm going to look for these because that one seemed cool, or I read it and I really liked it. And they probably have other similar books in publication. So like, I'm going to, if I see an Open Letter book at a used bookstore, again, same thing with the big book. Like I might grab it off the shelf and it might not seem like it's something for me or not something I want to like commit to right then and there, but it's instantly going to draw my eye and I'm going to at least see what it's about.
Yeah. There's obviously a financial component to all the decisions that these publishers make, Open Letter being no exception, because they have to consider that to exist, but it's definitely not the driving factor between but for why they choose to publish what they publish, and certainly not like a Penguin Random House where they're that's like, we just think that this is going to sell like hotcakes, so that's why we're going to publish it. Where those smaller independent publishers are really doing it for the love of the art, and so they're going to take some more risks on some more out there kind of stuff, and again, they are going to publish stuff that they think they can break even on,
Right.
But it's not the driving factor in their decision making for what they print. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. The smaller publishers, and don't get me wrong, like every once in a while, big name publishers do print some really cool stuff. I mean, Same Bed, Different Dreams was from Random House.
Yeah.
That was a really kind of out there book, very non-traditional. Right. And so that's cool to see. Colleen Hoover is published. I mean, Verity was published by Grand Central Publishing, which is an imprint of Hatchet Books. So,
Never even heard of them.
oh, really? Yeah, I have a couple from them. I can't think off the top of my head what it is, but yeah, it's definitely, again, a little pretentious to say like, ooh, I only read like, indie publishers, but I do think on the whole they just print more interesting stuff.
I agree.
So
I also have given up caring about like being pretentious. I try to help it if I can, but at the end of the day, like if someone's like, oh, Andrew only reads translated works from indie publishers, or he only reads Pynchon and Gaddis, and he's kind of a snob, then yeah, you're probably right.
It's funny, Yellowface actually has now sold 1 million copies, which is pretty crazy to think about. I think I read a stat that said the average book sells less than 100. So, of course, like self-publishing has brought that number, that average way, way down. But even when we were talking with Chad from Open Letter, if a book sells like 10,000 copies, that's like, hey, not bad.
Yeah.
And,
right.
And so to think about 1 million, like
that's insane.
That's insane. And I looked up what the kind of typical royalties are for publishing deals like major publishers. Not bad. Like, so I don't know if you're aware of how this works, but it's very similar in the music industry with record deals. But typically when you get a publishing contract, they give you an advance. Okay, we're going to give you $50,000 up front for this work. And then once they start selling, so you'll get like a percentage, let's say it's like 10%. And once your 10% payout has hit the 50,000, then you start earning on every copy sold after that. So you could potentially make much more than your advance. And obviously I have zero actual data of what R.F. Kuang's publishing contract looks like, but just some rough numbers. I mean, she potentially could have made, just in royalties, not even whatever the advance was, on Yellowface, she probably could have made anywhere between like $300,000 to maybe like $1 million. So
not bad.
Not bad. Yeah.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because like a lot of people would hear that and be like, ooh, yeah, I want to write a book. But then you realize that she is the 1% of the 1%. You know, like the 1%, there's probably a 1% that are the people that are able to earn a living. And then there's the 1% of them that are like making a lot of money. Right. So, okay, my next green flag is books written between 1945 and 2000. So that's just a time period that I'm generally going to be more receptive to. Don't really care for 19th century literature. I mean, there's some good stuff in there, but like when people talk about classics, they always think of the Tolstoy and the Dickens, and that stuff's great, but it's just not like what gets me off the couch and pulling something off the shelf, you know? And then new stuff, I'm a little bit hit or miss with newer stuff. But that postmodern, I guess, era of 1945 after the World War and, through the late 90s is kind of where my sweet spot seems to be.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Oh, God, excuse me.
Tums, please sponsor us for Andy's
seriously
safety and health.
I had a fried mortadella sandwich last night that was just glorious, and it's sitting a little heavy.
Jesus.
Yeah, I certainly have become a little bit more receptive to, more modern works, stuff published in the last 20, 25 years.
Yeah.
And have enjoyed a good handful of stuff that I've read from that period of time, but I would agree the like mid to late 20th century has just been my sweet spot.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a good blend between really, really strong writing and more experimenting.
Yeah.
Where prior to the 1950, the writing was very good, very strong, kind of standing on the shoulders of those 19th century greats, but was still a little too straightforward, not really bold or brave enough.
Yeah.
Not daring enough. But after that, in 1945 and onward, that's when you start to get the Vonnegut's and the Joseph Hellers and certainly Pynchon that are just like doing all kinds of wacky off the wall stuff. Yeah, I think that's why it's good. And then obviously writers now face the challenge of so much has already been done and said. It's difficult to continue to be original,
Right.
which is, a legitimate hurdle for them to overcome. And a lot of them don't.
Right.
So, any more green flags for you?
I think the only one I can think of is I like to look for really unique stylistic stuff. Obviously, I've talked about how much I love Krasnohor guy. So if I hear something like with like the long sentences that are just either going for, couple pages on end to 400 something on end without a break, that stuff always intrigues me. Jan Fosse's work was like that, especially with septology. Like there's not a single full stop until you get to the final page. I'm always kind of intrigued to like check that out. Again, it might turn into something where I start reading it and it's not for me, or I don't enjoy it as much as I thought, or, with something like, Ducks Newburyport is a great example of that. Like I was so in love with the idea of like, this is going to be 1,000 pages, not just a single sentence.
Yeah.
No full stops. Like I was all in and it just didn't land for me. But I think if I hear about something that's got this like really unique stylistic choice, I think about something like Troll by Dave Fitzgerald, told in the second person.
Yeah.
That's a bold move.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to pull that off. And I think he nailed it. So, if I hear about something like that, I'm like, that sounds like something I would want to check out.
Yeah.
Seems interesting.
Yeah. All right. My final green flag. Books about suffering and tragedy.
Nice.
I don't know why, but war, imprisonment, enslavement, death, I just tend to gravitate towards them. I think when we were reading the synopsis for Hard Rain Falling, before we did it for the book club, both you and I were like, yeah, we're in. And it was like something about him like being stuck in prison.
Yeah,
or something.
I think I remember when we were talking about the episode before we started reading it, where we were like announcing the book club was going to be a thing, that was going to be our pick, and you read that quote from him while he's in prison, which I don't remember the specifics of it, but you and I were both like, yep, I'm in.
Yeah.
He was just like in prison thinking about death.
Right.
Just like, yeah, I'm in.
Right. So like War Trash by Ha Jin, that's like, one of my favorite books, which is about the Korean War and this Chinese soldier that gets captured and he's living in a prison camp. East of Eden.
Yep.
It's about human suffering, more or less, you know. And Catch-22. It's about World War II. So, yeah, I don't know why, but that seems to be my jam.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that as far as my own tastes. Like, maybe not as specifically like war, death, suffering, but certainly not like happy-go-lucky, positive. The sun
certainly not enemies to lovers.
Yeah, the sun will come out tomorrow type vibes. I remember I was listening recently to Beyond the Zero when Will Evans, the head of Deep Vellum, was on, and he was talking about a book that Dalkey had published, and I can't remember the title. It's about Chernobyl. Chernobyl is somewhere in the title, so if someone knows what I'm talking about, drop it in the comments.
It's not the Ghost of Chernobyl, is it?
It might be.
Let's look it up.
But I had recently, I found a copy of it when you and I went to the Five Colleges book sale. I mostly grabbed it because it was a Dalkey for $1. And I mean, I thought it sounded good, but
Oh, Voices from Chernobyl?
Let me see you got the cover right there.
Maybe. Loading.
Yeah, that's it. Yep.
Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alexievich and translated by Keith Jessen.
Yeah. So Will was talking about that book, and he was like, "Yeah, it's one of the saddest books I've ever read." And I was like, "I gotta read it now." Like it sounds sounds great.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, even my nonfiction, like If This Is a Man by Primo Levi, it's a Holocaust memoir. Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, you know, so yeah. All right. Any other I keep saying red flags, green flags that you wanna give the listeners?
No, I think that's about all I can think of today.
Would be curious to hear what your favorite green flags are in books. What do you look for in books? Leave them down below. What do you think of ours? Are we pretentious dinks or are we on the right path?
I wonder if we get a response video out of this.
Yeah, we're a pretty big deal now. People are doing response videos to us, and the first one was the red flags. That was actually supposed to be our bonus content last time, was our reaction to the reaction video. We should probably do that today because we kind of already did a movies episode. So if you want to hear more of our stupid voices and see more of our stupid faces, join us on Patreon. You're in the book club for $5 a month, and your support goes to keeping this whole rigmarole going. Okay, we will see y'all next week, and we're gonna do the Infinite Jest episode next week.
I'm down if you think you can finish it.
I think I can. Yeah. So
it'll give me the week to prepare some thoughts.
Cool. All right, join us next week for a deep dive on Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace.